It wouldn't surprise me if every single player from the Louisville men's basketball team entered the transfer portal. In fact, you could actually say it's expected. We'll explain why on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And as always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. The college basketball transfer portal officially opened up fairly recently on Monday. 4 Cardinals have already entered the portal, and it's expected that many more enter as well. It wouldn't shock me if the whole team entered the portal. Truthfully, you could honestly say it's expected. So we'll explain why that shouldn't come as a shock. You shouldn't hit the panic button. We'll also, to flip the coin, predict who returns for this year or for next year's team. Will we have anybody come back for 2024-25? At the conclusion of the show, we will dive into the women's basketball tournament draw, talk about the Cardinals' pathway towards getting to the Final Four. Spoiler alert, it is not an easy road. So we'll analyze and discuss at the conclusion of the show. The college basketball transfer portal opened up on Monday. It didn't seem like a very well-kept secret that this was going to be Kenny Payne's last season as the head men's basketball coach for the Louisville Cardinals. And I think that this team, what we've seen from this team is that they've had a ton of opportunity to prove that they're as talented as they are on paper. And for the most part, I feel like it really wasn't all that much of a talent issue at times as it was coaching, but you could tell that this team still needed to upgrade in a couple spots across the board. 4 players have entered the portal thus far recently. Karan Davis, Curtis Williams, Caleb Glenn, and most recently on Tuesday, JJ Traynor. 4 players, 2 of them local guys, and it's probably just a matter of time before more players enter the portal as well. As I mentioned, it would not shock me in the slightest if all of the scholarship players for the Louisville Cardinals entered the portal. I honestly am expecting it at this point. It's not something that should catch anyone off guard, and it shouldn't cause you to hit the panic button for a couple reasons. For starters, it shouldn't catch you off guard. One of the main reasons why people said Kenny Payne needed a third year was because you have a young team that you're going to be bringing everyone back. And I heard that multiple times that they're going to bring almost every single player back, the whole core and almost all of the contributors. The issue with that statement is, number one, how do you improve roster-wise if you bring everyone back? Number two, we've seen in the landscape of college basketball, college sports at this time, keeping a whole team together without transfer portal casualties, it's not really likely. It's actually very, very unlikely. And with how bad Louisville was this year, let's say hypothetically Kenny was to have gotten a third year, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. I had heard from multiple people that a select amount of players were gone regardless of what happens. So that sort of takes down that overall hypothetical. But I think that people are getting a little bit anxious because not only is the coaching search starting to get a little bit exhausting and people are worried, but they're also wanting to get back to the tournament next year. And if you have all of your scholarship players enter the portal, it makes the task of rebuilding look that much more daunting. And I want to answer that and address that by saying, number one, it's to be expected with a coaching change. You're going to have portal movement if you don't have a coaching change. If you do, I mean, almost everyone's going to enter the portal. And I encourage it, because if you're a player right now and your future is uncertain, you can wait for the next coach, but there's no guarantee that that coach is going to want to keep you on the team. Or you could enter the portal later and some possible landing spots are already filled up. I saw a statistic that said the majority of players that enter the portal never even find a landing spot. They're not able to go back to their previous destination, and they aren't able to find a new spot either. And that's very sad, and it sort of highlights the ugliness and the downside of the portal, because the grass isn't always greener. But back to the topic at hand, this is expected. One thing that we need to know, just because a player enters the portal does not mean they have to leave. They can rescind their name from the portal. Actually, there are a couple guys that could enter the portal that I would look at to potentially take their names right back out of the portal a couple weeks later, because they are projected to be key pieces to this Louisville team under the new head coach. Now, who that head coach is going to be, I'm not sure. As of Tuesday evening, it seems like Dusty May seems to be the heavy favorite, but you just never know. So it'll come down to who the coach is going to be for some of these guys. Potentially hiring one coach over another might lead to better chances of keeping one player, but it's a conversation that we had actually last offseason between Kenny Payne year 1 and year 2, or year 0 and year 0.5, or year 1. We talked about, to have a roster overhaul, you have to have spots to do so. And for some reason, a portion of the fan base really just couldn't grasp that trend and grasp that to have a roster overhaul, you have to have open scholarships, meaning you have to have a good amount of players leave. I'm not saying it's a good portion of the fan base this time around, but there are some. I've had a couple in my Twitter DMs that have said, I'm getting a little bit nervous thinking that we're going to lose the entire team. We're going to lose the majority of the 2023-24 Louisville Cardinals men's basketball roster. It's the harsh reality of it. If you want to have a better team, ultimately you're going to have to, number one, improve coaching, but you have to go out and you have to get some better players as well. And it sucks. Some of these players are not Louisville level players. That's no disrespect to them. I wish them the best of luck. And this goes for anyone who enters the portal. I don't feel bitter about any of these players, regardless of where they end up, whether they rescind their name from the transfer portal, whether they go elsewhere. Wish them the best. It's their decision on what they feel like is going to be the best choice for their lives and for their basketball careers. And who am I to say that they are right or wrong? Wish them the best, and I hope that they're able to achieve their dreams and meet their goals. So, not all the players on this year's team were Louisville level players. I think that there's going to be an exodus of players that you expect to leave. There are going to be some players that leave that you're like, damn, I really wish he would have stayed. And there might even be a player or two. I doubt it's going to be more of this case, but there is the third option on the table that somebody stays and you didn't want them to stay, because some players aren't as highly regarded among the fan base or among portions of the fan base as they are with other portions. Sky Clark and Caleb Glenn, JJ Traynor, for example. I think that those three guys, some view them higher than others. Same with Mike James. So to make a long story short, I felt like this segment was appropriate to introduce to the show We've been talking about the coaching search and who the candidates are, but the roster is going to look a lot different next year because it has to. It's going to by default. And that's understandable. Don't panic. It's not ideal that you have to flip your entire roster, but with the right head coach, with the NIL infrastructure in place, there is an opportunity to flip this roster and make the tournament in 2025. But I don't think that you're going to have to replace the whole roster. I think there's going to be some players that return. Who, though? Let's predict. We'll do that here momentarily after we tell you about our friends over at Nissan. Today's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan. The Auburn Tigers can only be described as a Pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have been really creating a lane for themselves after claiming the top spot in the SEC as they knocked off the Florida Gators in the SEC Tournament Championship. They're set to make a run in the NCAA tournament. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Also want to take this time to tell you about our friends over at Amazon Fire TV. I recently got a Amazon Fire Stick, and I love it. I plug it into my TV, and it gives me access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Opening weekend for baseball is coming up, the college basketball tournament. There's no better time to get a Fire Stick from Amazon. But another reason why I've started to really love Amazon Fire is the Fire TV Channels app, which delivers a constant supply of the latest videos from my favorite sports teams for free because I like to go back and watch highlights, being the analytical nerd that I am, and go back and watch games. The TV channels lets you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date with all of the latest in the world of sports. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On College Basketball Breakdown Show is out and available on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Experts Andy Patton and Isaac Shade will break down their brackets and discuss everything that you need to know to fill out a winning bracket and prepare for this year's NCAA tournament that comes up in it's actually already started, but the second round starts in a couple of days. Find the Locked On Bracket Breakdown now in the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Should I stay or should I go? Okay, somebody's got to. I don't know. First of all, that wasn't even written in the script. Absolute cringe. 0 out of 10. One of the top 5 worst moments on the show, surrounded by the other 4 of likely episodes that had Grant Mulligan on them. Shout out to my guy G-Money, though. We'll have to have him back on the show here soon to talk Louisville football. Spring practice started today, but I'm getting a little bit off track. Who stays? Who goes? Let's predict. It's not as easy to predict others as it is some. So let's start with who we believe for certain is not returning. For starters, Dennis Evans, no longer cleared by the Louisville medical team to play for the university. I know that he was seeking a second opinion, and he's apparently been cleared and has entered the portal. Regardless, he's not going to be cleared to play at the University of Louisville. And for those that are saying, well, he did this as a stunt to not have to play for Kenny Payne, I can assure you with 150% certainty that that is simply not the case. And what Dennis is dealing with is extremely real. It's scary, and we continue to wish him the best of luck in his recovery. And hopefully he's able to get to a place to where he can play basketball at the high level like he wants to. So 4 other guys that I don't believe are going to be back, starting out with Karan Davis. This should be expected. Didn't play a single regular season minute for the Cardinals, dismissed from the team for an undisclosed reason. Was at a lot of the games, but he entered the portal pretty quickly, and it's probably can be inferred that he's not going to be back. Danilo Jovanovic, another one that got some playing time in the ACC slate, high-effort guy. I just felt like, he's probably a player that's better suited for mid-major level or lower Power 5 to where he's going to play a ton of minutes. I don't see a situation where Jovanovic plays a ton of minutes for the Cardinals next season. Trey White, it's been rumored that he's already left campus. I can't confirm nor deny that. But I think of the regular contributors for the team, White was one that we were expecting to move on. White was 4th on the team, averaging 12.3 points per game, 6 rebounds per game. Had some solid moments here and there. Struggled on the defensive side. At times was a black hole on offense and hurt offensive cohesion. But I think he did improve between his previous year and this year. I think Trey White's gone. The other player that I feel like for sure is gone is Emmanuel Okorafor, another guy that I like. Danilo Jovanovic, I'm not necessarily sure is up to Louisville level. 2.4 points per game. This will be his 3rd season in college basketball. So I expect he's going to go somewhere where he will play a good amount of minutes. I just don't think it's going to be here. So regardless of who stays, who goes, we wish them the best of luck. No hard feelings, and we'll be cheering for you from the outside looking in. 2 players that I feel like are unlikely to return, but I guess there's a chance, are the freshmen, Curtis Williams and Ty-Laur Johnson. I think that from what I've heard, it seems like it's unlikely that either one of these players are back, which sucks because I think that both have a high ceiling and could be winning players for this Louisville team. I just think ultimately they're probably going to go elsewhere, and it really shouldn't come as a surprise. I suppose it's up to the coach that will be named eventually on if he wants to pursue them or not. But at this point in time, I'm expecting Curtis and Ty-Laur to be entering the portal. Curtis already has and not returning. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 12 players on scholarship this season that will not be returning, in my opinion. Of the 5 remaining, I think you're going to see a combination. Ultimately, I would probably expect all 5 of these guys to enter the portal to at least weigh their options. I think Brandon Huntley-Hatfield is the most likely to return, had probably the strongest relationship with Kenny Payne, but he loves Louisville. His comments after the ACC tournament, it made it seem like the door is definitely open for a return, and he just had his best season, averaging 12.9 points per game, 8.4 rebounds, solid efficiency as well, and those numbers are not as impressive as how good he played in the ACC schedule. So I think he's probably the most likely to come back. Sky Clark is probably 2nd on that list. I think it's the same situation as he loves Louisville as well. He was the Cardinals' leading scorer at 13.2 points per game. I think he projects as a potential starting level 2 guard. And with a solid point guard, with a solid offensive structure, could really benefit. And if it is Dusty May, I could see a situation where Sky Clark is really prioritized because he's a 3-point shooter, and the offense is sort of tailor-made for a player like Sky Clark. So I could see Sky Clark returning. I think he's probably the 2nd most likely to return. It's like number 1, number 2, number 3, and then 4A, 4B. Number 3 for me is Mike James. Shout out to my guy, Jeremy Wallman, who said on the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast last Sunday that Mike is basically 50-50. It was likely that he was going to leave, but he's sort of torn because he loves Louisville as well. Solid wing that can defend. Took a step forward offensively. 3rd leading scorer on the team. Good rebounder and improved his offensive efficiency. I think that there's an opportunity there. Ultimately, it's going to depend on these next 2 guys, J.J. Traynor and Caleb Glenn. Number 1, will the next coach want to bring these guys back? And number 2, will they want to come back? I think that with the right coach, there is an opportunity. I think that these 2 are the most likely of the 5 to go elsewhere. But at this point in time, there is a legitimate chance that all 5 could possibly return. If you made me predict, because I said that we're going to do some predictions on who's going to return, I think personally there's going to be 4 players that come back. I think everyone but J.J. Traynor will be back, ultimately. I think Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, Sky Clark, Mike James, and Caleb Glenn will be back. And if it's not J.J. leaving, I think it's Caleb. So I think the top 3, Brandon, Mike, and Sky will all be back, and then one of JJ and Caleb Glenn. So you should expect 4 to 5 players tops returning from this year's team, a solid nucleus or a solid roster to build on and add via the transfer portal. So just be patient and see what the next coach is able to do. But for the remainder of the show, we are going to shift gears a little bit and the Louisville women's basketball team's NCAA tournament draw. Spoiler alert, man, it's a tough region. And we'll explain why here momentarily after we tell you about our friends and the title sponsor. That's not them. The title sponsor of the show, FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. The women's basketball bracket reveal, when it unfolded, as it unfolded, when I saw LSU's name pop up as the 3 seed in the 2nd Albany region, I'm thinking to myself, here we go. There is 0 chance that Jeff Walls' squad will not be the 6th seed in LSU's little pocket of the bracket. And they were. Wow, how coincidental for LSU and Louisville to be paired against each other with the storylines that we're going to talk about. There's 2 of them, 2 storylines that we'll identify here coming up shortly. Let's talk about the side of the bracket. They are in Iowa's region, who the Cardinals lost to in the Elite Eight last year. The top 5 seeds are Iowa, UCLA, LSU, Kansas State, Colorado, and Louisville is the 6th seed. They will square off with Middle Tennessee State down in Baton Rouge on Friday. It's a 1:30 tip-off, very, very early. They take on a Middle Tennessee State team that won the Conference USA tournament 29-4. They were a perfect 16-0 in conference play. And before we can talk about an LSU matchup, we have to admit that this is a very tough 6-11 matchup. Middle Tennessee is a very disciplined squad. 29-4. Their 4 losses come to Princeton, Michigan, Belmont, and Grand Canyon. They have some pretty convincing wins this year. They beat Memphis twice. They beat DePaul. They won big at Houston. They beat Tennessee by double digits, etc. So, and then they ran conference play. So Middle Tennessee State, or Middle Tennessee, I should say, is a very, very good team. Very balanced. 4 players averaging over 12 points per game. It begins with Savannah Wheeler, who is a do-it-all type player. She's actually from Catlettsburg, Kentucky. Spent her first 3 years at Marshall before joining Middle Tennessee. This is her 2nd year. She's averaging a team-leading 17 points per game, 5 assists, 4 rebounds while shooting 41% from the field. It's going to be a tough matchup. I think that the Cardinals get out of this and advance to the 2nd round, and that's where things get a little bit interesting. You have an opportunity to square off in Baton Rouge with the host 3rd-seeded LSU Tigers, and I don't have to spell it out as to why this matchup means more for the Louisville Cardinals. Number 1, Haley Van Lith left Louisville to join the reigning national champion LSU Tigers, solidifying their quote-unquote villain status in women's college basketball. Some of her comments that she's made in reference to leaving Louisville and joining LSU, I think, has rubbed the fan base wrong, and a lot of the fan base is really looking at this and they're wanting to get the last laugh, so to speak. So it's Haley Van Lith against her former team, Olivia Cochran and company against their former teammates. The second is, it's been over a decade, but don't expect her to forget. Kim Mulkey was very vocal after that 2013 Sweet 16 loss to the Louisville Cardinals that ended the Baylor Bears' undefeated season and Brittany Griner's college career. Don't believe for a second that Kim Mulkey's not looking at this possible matchup with Jeff Walz thinking, yep, here is my turn to try to give revenge. I could see LSU trying to run the absolute score up on the Cardinals in this matchup, and it would make sense, and vice versa. I don't think of this just from, LSU is got all the momentum. I think Louisville is going to go in this game with the same level of intensity because, obviously the storylines affect them as well. As a 6th seed, if you make it to the Sweet 16, I feel like it's a pretty successful tournament run. But with this Louisville program, it feels like Sweet 16 has become the norm. And Jeff Walz is a coach that can sometimes outcoach his seeding to where he, went to the national championship as a 4 seed and went to the went to the Elite 8 last year as a 4 seed, as a 6 seed looking to get to the Sweet 16. If they were, for some reason, I don't say that in a bad way, if they were to get past LSU in Middle Tennessee State, it's a tough go after that because you would likely be facing, theoretically, a UCLA team that is very, very good. They are 25-6 on the season. The Bruins are very good, led by former Stanford center Lauren Betts, 14.7 points per game, 9 rebounds. They've got a very good squad out there in central Los Angeles. And then you go up against the probably the most popular player in women's college basketball history, one of the most popular players in college sports history, in Caitlin Clark in Albany. And it's going to be tough to take her down, to take the Iowa Hawkeyes down, because it's not just Caitlin. They're a very, very good team, very veteran-led team. So long story short, the Louisville Cardinals have their work cut out for them. It's going to be a challenging tournament for them. You take it one game at a time. You live by the survive and advance mantra, and you continue to prove everyone wrong. Jeff Walz has done it before. He can do it again. No, he's not going to Kentucky, by the way. Before I have someone ask what I think about that, I don't think he is going to Kentucky. I don't think he's going to leave Louisville at all. So let's just get that out of the way and address the elephant in the room. But that is going to essentially conclude this episode of the show. Coming up later in the week, I'm not sure if we'll talk football recruiting this week or not. Potentially, we might talk about Jay Wright, Billy Donovan, some other coaches that people are continuing to introduce to the Louisville coaching search. But until tomorrow, this has been the Locked On Louisville podcast. Everyone have a great day. Go Cards.